Hello, guys and gals, and this is chapter 12, episode 12 of our reading of Strange Monsters and Great Searches. We are by George Laycock. We are almost completely done with this book. We have 2 chapters to go, and I think the last chapter is only like 4 pages long, so it won't take long. So, anyways, without further ado, we will go here and go to the copyright information. Find it. Okay, it says here that it's copyright 1973 by George Laycock, all rights reserved, published in large print by arrangement with Doubleday and Company, Incorporated, set in Photon 18 Helvetica Medium. We'll be reading Sasquatch Alias Bigfoot. And here we are. Sasquatch Alias Bigfoot, chapter 12. As you can see, there's not very many pages left. There's only 175, and we are on page 155, so there's only 20 pages left. Okay, here we go. From Northern California through Oregon, Washington, and into British Columbia, the mountains are wild and deeply timbered. In this country, there are new sightings every year of man-like monsters, huge, hairy, and indescribably ugly. Indians of the Pacific Northwest knew about these giants, wild men of the forest, hundreds of years ago. The Indians called them Sasquatch. Most recently, people standing spellbound before 14-inch-long footprints have called the monster Bigfoot. Each year, more people than ever before are out there in the deeply wooded valleys, hoping for a glimpse of the big-footed Sasquatch. Where could such monsters have come from? They could, some explain, have come from the same place the native Indians and Eskimos came from to settle North America. During the time of the Wisconsin Glacier epoch, the level of the oceans was lower. More of the world's supply of water was locked up in ice and snow. This exposed a wide bridge of land across the North Pacific connecting Asia and North America. Across this land bridge came the ancestors of many wild creatures found here: deer, bear, bison, wild sheep, and others. Perhaps the people moving a few miles at a time followed these animals, which they hunted for food, and perhaps in those times there came as well some creatures we still know very little about. Slipping along in the shadows of night may have been a tall, hairy creature looking more like people than like any other creature around them. This could explain how the ancestors of Sasquatch first came to the forests of the Pacific Northwest. They came on their big feet. They would have come, you understand, from Asia, which is also home to the abominable snowman, presumably a cousin to Bigfoot. If these two man-like monsters differ in form and coloring today, this can be explained by evolution and adaptation to different environments. People need only look at themselves to understand that humans of various parts of the earth have their own physical differences. It is likely that the creatures we now know as Bigfoot was never abundant, except for the fact that they have managed to stay out of the sight of men so well. There might by now be none of them remaining. Not until the 1950s did many people begin thinking seriously about the possibility that there might really be a Bigfoot. Then timber workers in lonely logging camps in Northern California began finding strange giant tracks around their dwellings and beside the forest trails. Plaster casts of these prints were sometimes made and preserved. The story spread, and people began to ask each other if such human-sized animals did live up there in the woods. Many believed they did. Soon someone recalled a remarkable story that had appeared in Portland, Oregon newspaper in 1924. On the east slope of Mount St. Helens lived a grizzled old prospector, all alone in his little cabin in the silence of the deep forest. On an August day, he left his cabin and hurried off in search of a forest ranger. He told the foresters his strange tale. "They woke me up in the middle of the night," he said, "throwing stones at my place. Some of them stones were big ones. Some even came through the roof, and all the time they were around the house, they were screaming like a bunch of apes. I didn't dare go outside. That's probably what they wanted me to do. Would you have gone outside? No, sir. Instead, I crawled under the bed and stayed there till morning come. Sometime in the night, them critters quit their screaming and slunk off in the dark. Next morning when I went outside, there was the tracks, big ones, a foot or more across, and right up beside my place. That story appeared in newspapers in Washington and Oregon. Soon the wooded slopes of Mount St. Helens were filled with nervous hunters that were alert for the slightest noise. The big footprints or a glimpse of a furry hide in the undergrowth. Considering the assortment of rifles, shotguns, and pistols they carried, it was a blessing nobody got shot. They saw no sign of the Bigfoot. Gradually, folks around those mountains seemed to forget the giant, hairy monsters again. Sasquatch was becoming more elusive than ever. He wanted very little to do with man, and this was understandable even to man. But following the reports from the California logging camps, the story began growing again. In the years since, the evidence has piled up. More and more people in the Pacific Northwest are convinced that something in human form, but not very human at all, really lives in the deepest and darkest forests. There is now a list of more than 300 reported sightings of Bigfoot. Undoubtedly, there would be more, except for the elusive nature of the beast and its nocturnal habits. Still, no Bigfoot has been captured or killed. Seldom has one been photographed. The most notable exception occurred in the mountains of North California in 1967. Roger Patterson, living with his wife and 3 children on the little horse ranch they operate near Yakima, Washington. For several years, they had been studying the exploits of Bigfoot and figuring out the best place to go looking for the creature. On October 20th, 1967, Mr. Patterson and his friend Bob Gimlin had been high in the mountains in Northern California for almost a week. On that day, Mr. Patterson said, "When riding horseback up a creek bottom, we encountered this creature. My horse smelled it, jumped and fell." Mr. Patterson scrambled for his saddlebag. "I got the camera out of the saddlebag," he said, "and ran across the creek, and we were able to get 29 feet of 16mm colored film." After 3 miles of tracking through rough country, the 2 men lost Bigfoot's trail in deep undergrowth. They made plaster casts of the footprints. Other people returned later and saw and measured the 14.5-inch prints. This newly made film was sent down to Hollywood. They're experts in special effects, men who really know how to set up a fake picture, studied and restudied Patterson's disturbing movies. Each of them decided that in no way could Patterson have faked his pictures. Next, the movies were shown to a lengthy list of scientists. Among them were noted zoologists. They arrived as doubters, but following a look at the Patterson movies, left shaken. Of special interest to the zoologists was the movement of the muscles as the Bigfoot walked. This movement was proof enough to many that the creature was real and that the Patterson movies authentic. The figure photographed a female walking upright like a human and measuring about 7.5 feet tall, 3 feet across the shoulders, had arms 3 feet long, and weighed an estimated 800 pounds. In addition to his movies, Patterson tells of other evidence that Bigfoot lives. In 1958, he interviewed Charles Cates, an aging man who had once served as mayor of North Vancouver. Cates recalled 3 old Indians whom he considered reliable, and all of whom told of hairy giants they had seen in their youth. Perhaps there were more of the monsters around in those times. One of the Indians had been in a tent one night with friends when a Bigfoot stuck its hairy head through the tent door and looked in upon them. Near Yankton, Oregon, according to Mr. Patterson's records, several people sighted the hairy giants in 1926. A truck driver swore that one of them had trotted along beside his logging truck looking into the cab at him. In 1941, according to a report given Patterson by Mrs. George Chapman, she and her children saw an 8-foot hairy man come out of the woods. The creature went into a lean-to behind their cabin, and it went in the back door. The Chapmans went out the front door. They fled into the forest. For a long time they huddled there in the shadows. When they returned to their home, huge tracks marked the place where the giant had walked. The deputy sheriff from Blaine, Washington came out and made casts of the footprints. This Bigfoot had the biggest feet of all. They measured 16 inches long. The Bigfoot tramped down a patch of potatoes as it departed for the forests. Then, the next year, near Eugene, Oregon, Don Hunter and his wife spotted a giant biped taking long strides over the mudflats of Todd Lake. Such reports, when coupled with Patterson's movies, are not to be taken lightly. So much interest has been aroused in these stories of Bigfoot that at least 3 organizations have been created to seek the creature. One is the American Resources and Development Foundation, Incorporated, organized by Ron Olson, one of the most respected of all Bigfoot hunters. His organization is programming all reports of sightings on a computer in efforts to pinpoint the best possible place to continue the search. Another is the International Wildlife Conservation Society. This group is based in Washington, D.C. At the head of it is an explorer with experience searching the Himalayas for Bigfoot's cousin, the abominable snowman. Even Washington's socialites have helped finance the group. Roger Patterson has also set up the Northwest Research Association with these groups, plus uncounted individual amateur monster hunters loose in the woods. The chances seem better than ever that Bigfoot will soon slip up, be captured, measured, photographed, and verified. Some people have admitted they plan to shoot the first Bigfoot they find, thereby ending speculation, but most hope only to take one of the furry beasts captive long enough to study him. With this in mind, expeditions go afield, equipped with dart guns, carrying drugs to put Bigfoot to sleep. Patterson has mapped out a complete course of action. On that memorable day when Bigfoot is eventually tracked to Earth, the producers will include the following steps. Small groups of specialists will be scouring the mountain country for fresh evidence. When a specimen is obtained, Patterson explains, all personnel and equipment will be concentrated on it. Even after the effects of the drug-carrying dart wear off, Bigfoot will be kept under full sedation. This seems safest. All field forces will be rushed to the scene. A call will go out for a helicopter. Blood samples, bone marrow, body fluids, all will be collected and labeled. Plastic casts will be made of teeth, jaws, hands, feet, and external genitalia. Meanwhile, cameras will click and whine, tape recorders will run continuously, and a stenographer will record written observations. Security measures will go into effect at once. One reason will be to protect the researchers against attack by other Bigfeet. There will also, as Patterson explains, be the need to protect the field group against interference by everybody, including the press. Patterson welcomes new members to his association, which can be reached at P.O. Box 1101, Yakima, Washington. For their dues, members receive a certificate plus a colored photograph of Bigfoot. This is enough to make adventure-minded people everywhere feel a little closer to the monsters. One of the most recent centers of Bigfoot activity is around the country seat town of the Dalles, Oregon. According to the sheriff's office in the Dalles, 5 people testified that they saw the creature in the neighborhood June 2nd, 1971, a one-day record. A month later, there was an additional sighting near the same location. Visitors flocked to town, but there was no more observations reported during the summer. Bigfoot will also certainly appear again. No one knows where. People all the way over in Montana and Wyoming and other states as well talk of the Bigfoot. Many would not be at all surprised to find these shaggy giants living in their mountains too. Doubters sometimes suggest that anyone with a mountain and a forest can have his own Sasquatch. One thing is certain, if Bigfoot is really out there in the hills, his name belongs on the government's official list of rare and endangered species. Whatever his fortunes may have been in the past, his numbers have dwindled to a precious few. All who seek to kill Bigfoot should reconsider. He appears, after all, to be a harmless monster. This is the firm belief of Skamania County, Washington. Okay, wait. This is the firm belief of Skamania County, Washington. County commissioners have recently passed a law making anyone who kills a Bigfoot or Sasquatch object to a fine of $1,000 and 5 years in jail. To man and Bigfoot alike, this is a refreshing development. We live in an age where hundreds of wild species are becoming rare and approaching extinction. Only after the passenger pigeons were already gone did we pass laws to save them. The bison nearly became extinct for the same reason, but here is a case where we pass a law to save a wild creature even before it is found, and a monster at that. If you should see a Bigfoot, perhaps you should tell him about that. It might help convince him that men are not such monsters after all. In the next one, we read the final chapter, Hiding Places for Strange Creatures. But that is in the next chapter. The next episode, rather. We have been reading Strange Monsters and Great Searches by George Laycock. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you want to support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.